Welcome everybody, and I'm just going to repeat that. I hope you have your food, your plates filled up with food, because we do have a long haul through the afternoon. So please do that as you join into the conversation here today. I'm really excited to be able to lead this food for thought conversation with all of you. Let me give you a sense on why I chose this theme on D&I Impact. And we've called it Creating D&I Impact Why Only Events and Programs Will Not Work. I'm actually an activist for this in a way, because I must say that every time I meet people through the forum and otherwise, and they talk to me about their organization's commitment to D&I, and I probe a little further, and very ever so often, the response is that, yeah, we're very pro diversity and inclusion. We celebrate Women's Day, or we have an odd women development program that happens, which really, when I ask more probing questions, there isn't anything significant around that program other than it looks like a patronizing program to make women who join the organization believe that the organization is committed to their development and learning, which they ought to be in any case committed to everyone's development and learning. So there's nothing special really happening to these women in terms of, there being a career advancement program or a career progression program. There's just some development program that is being conducted. Interestingly so, the program's also often being delivered by someone who does not have any expertise in the space, and it's just doing this like any other development program for women. And I know there's variation on this, and some of you joining may be saying, oh, well, we do a more sort of structured job around this. But this conversation is really meant to be able to draw practitioners in the space of D&I and human resources professionals to be able to see this agenda in perspective. And I think there are a lot of dilemmas and confusions around this agenda. So I thought we'd try and clear some of those up through this conversation, and then maybe you can ask more questions. So I'm going to start this conversation with 3 stories. And I want you to be able to bear these stories in mind, because I'm going to ask you to be able to take to the chat and give me your reactions to these 3 stories. I'm going to ask you a question at the end of relating the 3 stories to you. So in one organization that I know of, we were actually very active enthusiasts around diversity and inclusion, and especially integrating gender. Now, that is the lowest common space to start off from. It's like the low-hanging fruit, if you want to call it that. And like some of our panelists said earlier, why would you fish only in half the pond? I mean, this is the diversity that's staring you in the face. A very significant number of women who are educated, and they can be pulled, they're available in the talent pool, they're educated, some of them are highly educated, and you could easily integrate them into the organization. And this becomes the most obvious agenda. We also score very poorly as a country on various indexes, human development indexes, when it comes to empowerment of women, when it comes to treating women with equality. We're also seen in many negative respects across the world in terms of the violence against women and the way in which we treat women in terms of both sexually and in terms of physical abuse. So this is a space to be able to start in. And like I said, for corporates, this is a talent pool that is already available. So our plan was also to do the same. And I think part of what it is that we were attempting to do post the 2013 regulation to be able to integrate women on boards, when it became mandatory as per Companies Act to be able to integrate women on boards. We went about appointing senior women from the organization. There weren't very many, but the ones we had who were above GM positions, we started appointing them on the boards of various group companies. Now, one of them was a senior finance professional, so we appointed her on one of our flagship company boards. She attended the board meeting the first time. The board meetings were held every quarter, so she attended the board meeting the first time, and and then she attended the second one. And at the end of the second one, the CEO of that organization came back, reached out, and said to me that just want to let you know that the new addition to our board, has not yet made her debut. We haven't really heard her say anything in the last 2 meetings. She's there. She's silently listening to everything. She's willing to sign on to documents, but we don't see any great contribution come out. So do you want to figure out with her how it is that she's faring. So we tried probing to understand whether this was a sort of psychological safety issue, or whether they believe she wasn't competent to be able to contribute. What exactly was their observation? And here's what we got as the as the feedback, which is that since she's not said anything much, we don't know how to gauge this. And since she's handled senior positions, why would it be psychological safety? And so we said, okay, we'll talk to her and let's figure it out. And we did talk to her. And here's what we found. She came back saying that, look, I don't think I got a space to be able to come in and say anything. There were just very many animated discussions in the room, and I don't think I'm fully inducted to the business yet to be able to come in and make any valuable suggestion or recommendation or question what it is that the group is doing. And then upon probing further, she said that, actually I'm not used to speaking up when a lot of animated men are speaking together. And then she rooted that back to something that she may have experienced in her upbringing that made her inhibited to be able to speak up in the presence of men, especially if they were speaking in loud voices and were part of an animated discussion. So we did resolve this, but I'm going to leave you with this as a story. So I want you to ponder on this, right? It's a very senior person, 20 plus years of experience, opportunity to serve on a board, does not say anything in the first two meetings. And there is an ask on, can you find out what's going on with her, because we've not got her to contribute at all. We've not even heard her voice. And a couple of other, including the independent directors, are asking that why doesn't she say anything? So this is story one, right? And then I'm going to go on to the next one, which is where, there was a large women's ERG meet that happened in one of the companies. And it had almost 400 women attending one of the events that the ERG had created. And as part of that, the legal head of the organization addressed the women for about half an hour in a session called Women Know Your Right. And he was talking about rights associated with Sridhan and stuff like that. And somewhere at the end of that, he said that, look, my wife and I do a lot of pro bono work over weekends. If any of you women would like to reach out, feel free to be able to reach out. I mean, some of you may have concerns which you can't raise in the official context. You may be embarrassed to do that, especially if you're senior or you're already accomplished, you're doing well within the organization. You may be worried about perhaps raising some of this, or you may need help externally. For example, if you're in a domestic violence situation and the police is not taking your complaint, you can reach out to us. Also, if any of you want to divorce a violent husband or have a situation, reach out. We'd be happy to be able to advise you. And so he did give us email ID and whatever else. 2 or 3 days later, he came looking very frantically, saying that at the back of this session, he had, and these were about 500 odd women who were attending the session, and we had about 48 emails in his inbox. All of these women are reaching out for help because they were in a domestic violence situation. These were highly educated women. They're urban, they're English speaking, they're financially independent, and they all reached out to him because they wanted to discuss, and some of them had even related what their experience really was. So this is number two. These are educated, qualified, very many, very well earning, and we had a huge drive for pay parity. So they were earning the same as men within the organization, and they had, they reached out for help around domestic violence challenges. This is scenario number two. And the third one I'm going to give you is a little out of this context, but I'm still going to give it to you because it will still help me make my point, which is that we got a new head of finance in one of the organizations, and he looked at what was happening with talent, and he saw that there was a general talent. The talent pipeline building program involved hiring CAs within the organization. So it would not be uncommon to be able to have, maybe 20, 25 chartered accountants joining every year. Sometimes, some years it's been more than 30, but otherwise it's largely about a group of 25. And by the time we were in the third year, we'd be left with 5 or 3 or 4 chartered accountants, because clearly, since this was the audit team, interestingly, chartered accountants don't like to audit. So they didn't see a long-term career in audit, and they would either want to move to another interesting place through the IGP inside the organization, or they'd want to move outside the organization. And the organization would try their level best to keep them with the organization by giving them an IGP option. And so since he was new and he was seeing this with a fresh pair of eyes, he said that, why are we going out every year to hire 25, 30 chartered accountants when we barely have 2 or 3, sometimes 5 left in year 3? I mean, this is like the definition of madness, it's insanity. If they're not staying, why are we going back again to be able to get them? So this definitely needs to be re-looked at. And so we all decided to go back to the drawing board, and we said, what do we want to do with this? And we figured that we might want some intake of chartered accountants, but at a higher level within the organization where we should be more sort of supervisory. And at the entry level, we could actually start looking at perhaps engineers, who knew the plants well and who could help us with the audit. And they might want an IGP move to come into audit. We then looked at what other pools available in the market, and we said, why don't we look at MCOMs? I mean, MCOMs typically don't have a great career path from the university. Let's hire MCOMs to be able to come in and do the audit job. And then as we explored more and we got more creative and more bold with this, I actually came up with the fact that, the CA program is a very tough one, and you have very significant number of people who don't clear the program. And so you have a large talent pool called CA Interfail. And we said, why don't we explore this talent pool? Now, it's very interesting because this is the group that keeps attempting the CA exams and is actually quite seasoned and are sometimes, to the experience of a lot of CFOs, smarter than perhaps qualified CAs. And so we brought them on board and created our own unique talent pool at an entry level. And we were, lo and behold, had the lowest attrition that group had ever experienced. We had almost 100% retention at the end of year 2. And this got people really encouraged, and they said, hey, why just CA Interfail? Let's look at CAT failed, right? Let's look at people who attempted their UPSC exams, the IAS exams, and failed. And so people got a little more excited to be able to explore a little more. I'd like you to believe that we didn't go only after people who had failed, but we kind of bust the stigma that people who failed at something cannot succeed within organizations. I want you to take to the chat box now with these 3 stories that I just shared, and tell me, what is your takeaway from these 3 stories? Yeah, if you look at it from the diversity and inclusion lens, tell me, what is your takeaway from these stories? Yes. So I have Anjana saying, with regards to the 4th story, if instead of wondering why she wasn't talking, if a board member had simply asked, what's your take on this? Yeah, that's a good one. And people could do that. And we did. I didn't come into solution yet. Anjana, the question at this point is, if you go to DNI lens, what is your takeaway from these stories? And I'll come to my main question after that. Someone says the 3rd one is about removing the hiring manager's bias. Okay. Supraja, do you want to try and explore socio-cognitive diversity and exploring the funnel in terms of who can actually do the job? And you're so right. If we took out some of our biases, we can actually hire so differently inside organizations. And the purpose of my conversation here is not to be able to advocate that the people who failed will make better employees. But I mean, who knows? Our experience has been really positive indeed. To what Anjana is saying, right? And Anjana is reacting more to the senior lady not having a chance to be able to come in. And, and you're right, somebody should have brought her in. And that is what we did as we went forward, and that's how we integrated her. But we want you to be able to explore and see this from the DNI lens, to be able to say that even after you create opportunities, which is even after you bring people into the organization, the diverse groups into the organization, you have a significantly large responsibility to integrate them. And that, therefore, the whole orientation on diversity and inclusion being events and programs and all of that, and I see a lot of enthusiasm around that. But you'll see, whether you see the first story on the senior woman being integrated, or if you look at the second story, which was around a significant large number of women who are educated and qualified, who have a domestic violence challenge that you're trying to get your arms around. And the third one, which is to do with exploring the talent pool to be able to bring in different kinds of people so that you're giving people who are stigmatized in the environment a chance to be able to have a career. Now, none of these jobs, come in the domain of any form of transaction or only rest with representation within the organization. In the first two cases, the point we're trying to make here is that even if you did bring in senior women within the organization, there is still a job to be able to include them. And that job, to Anjana's point, which is why can't somebody in the board ask her, what do you think about this, or bring her in rather than allowing her to remain silent, requires work of influence around inclusion. So this is not about programs and this is not about events. This is very deeply rooted, move forward Suneet, into a culture building initiative, which is the ability to be able to drive change within organizations. Unfortunately, in a lot of organizations, and this is for reflection for each one of us who's joined into this session, for a lot of organizations, DNI is about compliance, which is you've been given some numbers which we are driving, whether from the international or from the board or from the DNI council, wherever it is that you've committed to these numbers, the whole orientation towards it becomes compliance, and that itself beats the purpose. So my first invitation to you is to turn it around and make it from compliance to culture change. They're all lovely C's, but from compliance to culture change. And if we shifted our focus from only compliance, whether compliance to a policy, compliance to a number, compliance to the way you believe people need to act, you cannot drive that. It requires to happen around with culture change. I don't know how many of you were in the conversation we had with the CHROs this morning, and I asked a question around the soft bigotry of low expectations when you bring in diverse groups. This is the reality of how line managers feel, no matter how enthused we are at the DNI end to be able to drive diversity and inclusion and integrate different kinds of talent within the organization. So my first invitation to you is to change compliance into culture change. And the minute you do that, you'll start looking at this agenda very differently. So from compliance to culture change is my first message to you. Move forward. I also want to say that diversity is not a problem. So for example, if you start with we don't have enough women, or we don't know how to integrate specially abled, or I don't think we have compassion within the organization to be able to bring in certain kinds of diverse groups. Diversity and inclusion is an opportunity. It cannot start on the note of problems. And I see with a lot of organizations that it starts with something that's not there, or something that's broken, something that needs to be fixed. This is a positive change agenda within the organization. It needs to be driven with the spirit of positivity, where you don't frame a problem and instead view diversity and inclusion as an opportunity. So this is another piece I want you to be able to note down. The DNI is an opportunity. It's not a problem, right? Move forward. And also, we find, and you'll see even in some of the panels, we've got women who are driving diversity and inclusion within organizations. The Food for Thought series, we were looking for male DNI heads who could actually come in and drive Food for Thought series. We couldn't find them easily. So those of you who want to be able to come forth for the job, use the chat. If you're men in the audience and you'd like to be diversity and inclusion head or lead a diversity and inclusion dialogue, because we're looking for you. My next point here is primarily the fact that there are two challenges we seem to have within organizations. One is DNI is held by HR, and it's seen as an HR agenda. So long as you see it as an HR agenda, it'll be seen as one of the high potential programs that you're driving, or it's a leadership development program that you're driving. It's not a program. It's a culture change agenda, and therefore it needs to sit at the center of the organization. And like many people said in the first panel, that it needs to be everyone's responsibility. It can't be HR's responsibility. So much as you're enthused and excited to be able to run this, your job should be to quickly, your sign of success within the organization is when you start seeing many more people on this agenda. For so long as this remains within the domain of HR, I'm afraid you're not going to be able to drive the culture change that is really required. You may be able to drive some degree of the compliance, but not the culture change that is required to truly create vibrant, happy, joyous, prosperous, contributing, innovating, diverse and inclusive organizations. So two things here. One, it needs to belong to all. It needs to be at the center. It can't be something that is belong to one that is owned by one function or one group of people who are in support functions, where there's a view that they have the time to be able to do it and the rest of us are doing business. And the second one being that why should only women be leading this agenda? I have a big question on that. And I'm delighted wherever I see that there is a male DNI or especially able person who's the DNI or the DNI head, or it's a group of people, and that they're bringing in all these lenses and perspectives to be able to lead in DNI within the organization. It becomes very difficult for this to be able to drive change if it's a women's club. And so at the cost of being provocative, I'm going to ask many of you in the audiences to be able to go back, to be able to figure how many men allies and men as diversity partners can you get into your DNI agenda, to drive the DNI agenda, to own the DNI agenda. So diversity needs to move where it belongs, which is the center of the organization where everyone owns it. Move forward. I want to be able to talk about what question we're asking when we drive. And I know that different organizations at different levels of evolution. And some of you want to, figure how is it that we can move it, even if we started this off with tokenism, how do we now integrate it and make this more strategic? And I think the best way to do this is to be able to position it for the line. All those of you who are looking to be able to influence the line, bring the line, integrate the line more into this conversation, is to be able to talk about why do you need the DNI plan? And much as people would say, oh, but it's for humanity and it should just evolve naturally. And I agree it should. And I know that it's right. It's the right way to go. But we're so deeply embedded in our conditioning and in our unconscious biases that more often than not, this agenda will take very long if you're leaving it for human kindness and generosity to emerge, for people to do what is right and to show compassion for diverse groups and for equality. So I'm going to recommend that you take a more, this can't be an all-heart agenda, because what I've seen with organizations that treat it as an all-heart agenda is that they get a best effort outcome. They don't get the best optimal outcome. They get a best effort outcome. And so I'm going to recommend that you don't start seeing DNI, as a plan that you just put out there. You instead need to present it to the line as which opportunity is it solving for? Which is, what is this solving? What is this an opportunity for us to solve what within the organization? So in short, I'm talking about a business case. And like one of the speakers from Dell was saying earlier, that this is not a matter of choice, really. It is what organizations need. But how can you convince the organization that they need that to be able to survive? If you leave it only as a model high ground program, I'm afraid you'll not get the momentum that you're actually looking for. So what problem is this solving for you as an organization? It's important for everyone to be on board on that. It's an opportunity to solve what within your organization. Move forward. It's very important, and it's kind of ironic that I'm saying this on a platform where a lot of people will receive recognition today for the great work they're doing. But your motivator to do all this should not be the recognition, but the respect that you're going to earn as an employer within the organization, you being the representative of the employer. So DNI is an opportunity to gain respect by all. And you get that because you listen to people. I heard a very powerful quote the other day that the best way to be able to get influential is to become the most helpful person around. And I think the pandemic is teaching us that. And I think it's just ever so important to be able to listen to people, because the more you're listening, the more you're doing the right stuff inside the organization, they know you're listening. And so diversity and inclusion is an agenda of compassion. It's an agenda, and compassion is not a soft term. A lot of people think that compassion is the same as sympathy, or compassion, if we start becoming even empathetic to everyone, how will we do business? And who do we be empathetic to, and who can we not be empathetic to? So I'm going to ask you to treat compassion as a business skill. And increasingly, the pandemic has taught us that compassion is indeed a business skill. It starts with listening to people and with what you're doing within the organization. For example, when you create a ramp for someone who needs to use a wheelchair, or you create an environment where leaders will ask the lady who's not speaking in the meeting to say, what is your point of view? We'd like to hear you. The fact that they'll do that is because, and don't expect everyone to do this on their own. So they will need handholding, they will need grooming, they will need sensitization to be able to do it. But you'll do that sensitization because you're listening. So I want you to be able to internalize some of this, which is if you drive this for respect for your brand and for who you are and who you stand for, and that you don't just espouse all these things on your websites, but you actually have agendas and programs at the ground level to actually achieve this, what you'll get as an outcome is deep respect as an employer. Move forward. Think mosaic and not melting pot. Sometimes I've seen people answer this question in one breath, which is, so what kind of diverse groups do you have within the organization? Oh, we have women, we have millennials, we have some LGBTQ, we have something else. So almost sounds like embellishments within the organization. I'm going to say that. And therefore, what happens is we believe all diverse groups requires the same kind of program. So think about it as mosaic and not as melting pot, so that you're able to look at interventions differently depending on the unique needs of every diverse group. And that will spell of compassion, of deep compassion and empathy. Move forward. I also want to talk about the fact that diversity and inclusion urges diverse and non-diverse leaders to work together. So the picture of of success that you may want to visualize is when you have people who are non-diverse, who are diverse, who are working along with people who are non-diverse as part of your leadership team. So you may want to look at that vision as a vision of success. Where there's an amalgamation of thoughts, an amalgamation of lens, and that all of them have the opportunity to be able to succeed. So what's at the heart of good diversity and inclusion within an organization, if you manage it well, is that it actually speaks to your talent management programs, it talks to your career advancement programs, and it must work with workplace performance. And the point I'm trying to make is that, I had a very intrigued question from, the CHRO of a very large multinational company. And he said, we've been at this for almost the last, I think, 8 or 10 years. And, we went from almost having 2 or 3% women to we almost have now, 25% women. We've tried bringing in and integrated some specially able people who've come in. We're a technical company, but we've tried hiring people who are not from similar backgrounds. We've done some of that. And, I was so driven when I saw the research around diversity and inclusion. The outcomes are brilliant. You get increased revenue, you increase shareholder return, you get higher innovation, the organization gets higher engagement, higher retention. Can you tell me when all this is going to happen? Because we've been doing this for about 7 or 8 years. We're just wondering when does all this start happening? And so I have to bring in the perspective on performance. You see, when I say it's a business case, and I tell you to be able to, to articulate that, to be able to bring in more involvement, and let the joy and the natural human spirit follow. The other part we're talking about is that it has to impact for you to get the outcomes that you're looking for. And there may not be any marked outcomes that you're looking for. You may not be accountable by so-and-so year to have this kind of revenue or that kind of innovation. But you're on that journey and you can already see the joy and the prosperity that is coming through. The programs, for it to make sense at ground level, must speak to talent management, to talent advancement, and to workplace performance. Move forward. Moving people to the center of your growth strategies. Finally, it must help create innovation mindsets. One of our panelists spoke about the 3 pillars of diversity and inclusion, which is representation, inclusion, and impact. Most organizations seem to appear to be at the representation phase, whereas what you really want to come out of the agenda is not going to happen till you focus on inclusion. So developing mindsets that are required to win and to be able to make the organization more creative, more contributing, more vibrant, it's extremely important to be able to inculcate. And I thought I'd articulate some of the behaviors which are in line with the kinds that you require to be able to create an innovation mindset within the organization. So high levels of transparency in communication, the ability to evoke trust in people because of your candor, straightforwardness, and the rest. Individuality, really a culture that celebrates individuality and difference. An entrepreneurial mindset, which means that things may be less than perfect, but you can adapt, adjust, be flexible, but make things happen. Passion for what it is that the organization is trying to achieve, and the promise of community. You know what I mean? To become a member of the community, in the joy of being a member of the community, and that membership that you really enjoy of being part of the community. All these are mindsets that you require inside the organization. And I can see how difficult this would be, especially in the COVID situation. But I want you to be able to focus on this and look at how it is, where it is that your organization stacks up on this. I want to make a quick invitation for questions, so please continue asking questions as you go along. Move forward. So what can we do about all this? And I have some very quick hacks. Of course, they require a lot of effort and work, but I'm going to give you some ideas. Move forward. So diversity of thinking is the new frontier, really. So how can you get diversity of thought going? And, which really means busting many things within the organization. We are typically command and control in our style of leadership, group think in terms of how it is that leadership operates together, the ability to, typical cultures of valuing consensus. You've got to bust a lot of this to be able to drive diversity of thought. It's easier said than done. It requires a lot of work, it requires humility, it requires for leaders to show vulnerability. In a lot of the executive coaching that I do, this is the primary challenge that we have, which is the inability to be able to allow for diverse thinking and to empower people to even articulate what their diverse thought or idea might really be. So all the organizations that don't work seriously on this are just going to be paying lip service to innovation, because there's going to be no innovation unless we have the humility to be able to drive diversity of thought within organizations. Move forward. Diversity without inclusion is not enough. We've spoken enough about this even during the conference, and I'm going to articulate that again. This requires work, and that work is culture change. And if you don't have the ability to do this yourself, you should get expert help. But this is something that needs to be driven top down throughout the organization. And it also requires a mindset that needs to be developed, and it doesn't happen overnight. So diversity without inclusion is just simply not enough. It's like inviting people to the party but not asking them to dance. So you have a challenge if you only have diversity with no inclusion. Move forward. Inclusive leaders cast a shadow. So remember, there is the spiral effect, or if you want to call the cascade effect, when you have a few good leaders who kind of role model inclusion. So identify them and include them early in the game on what it is that you're attempting to do within organizations. Let's move forward. Middle managers matter. Increasingly, they matter, especially as we're working in this very dispersed environment where some people work from office, some people work from home, or perhaps everybody works from home. Middle management is what is actually driving performance in a lot of organizations. Building this, if you have a weak middle management, it's going to be very, very difficult to sustain anything, whether performance, morale, engagement within organizations. So focus on this. This is a very important group of people to work with. Of course, it's got to be top down, but augment your middle management. That's very important. Move forward. And rewire the system. You've got to rewire behaviors, so you don't just because you've begun to hire diverse groups does not mean that you have the requisite behaviors within the organization. You will have to rewire this and work closely to be able to get people to start behaving differently. Move forward. Perform a culture reset, not a tick in the box program. So it's got to be something that drives your culture forward, your culture agenda forward. And that's why I shared some of the stories at the start, because none of those stories, none of those situations can get solved with the program, right? Move forward. And I want to be able to leave you with some reflection questions. But before we do that, we'll come to that in just a minute. Sunit, can you get the poll question up? Let me get the audience involved in a poll. Can we get the very first poll question up? Okay. So respond to this for me. Do you agree many diversity agendas focus way too much on compliance and representation rather than viewing this as a culture change opportunity? Okay. Okay. Seems to be 80-20. Move forward. Next question. Okay, that yes seems to be going up. All right, let's go to the next question. Do you agree that there needs to be a DNI strategy, business case articulated to get more buy-in across for your DNI journey? Okay, super stuff. Let's move to the next one. Hiring diverse groups with no career advancement program will not enable the conversion of performance and innovation. Do you agree with that? Hiring diverse groups with no career advancement programs will not enable conversion on performance and innovation. Okay, great stuff. Super. Right. And let's go. Sunil, do we have one more? Yes. All right. Okay, super. Go back to my deck, and I have some reflection questions I want to leave you with. And we're happy to be able to post some of these questions offline if you'd like that. Okay, so some questions. If you want to note them down, please feel free to note them down. Does your organization have a one-size-fits-all strategy to manage diversity and inclusion? So important question. A lot of people say we do diversity and inclusion. Looks like one plan for everyone. How will you design and deliver initiatives keeping in view the needs of different talent segments in your organization? How will you manage employees with different needs, aspirations, and experiences? How are you adjusting your talent strategies to consider female millennials and their career stages? How will you deliver visible diversity action and results? Move forward. What will it cost your organization if you get your talent pipeline wrong? So do you want to ask this question to your top management when you talk to them the next time? Do you have the right role models in place to attract, develop, and retain female millennials at the middle management level? I mean, that's where most of the pipeline is leaking. So do you have the right role models to be able to attract, develop, retain female millennials? What are you doing to enable objective talent, performance management, and career progression systems and processes? How are you making this objective? What are you doing to create a progressive feedback culture for the development? Again, I'm just pointing out female millennials. You can replace this with any other diverse group. What is your organization doing to create a cadre of women leaders with global mindset? I mean, this could be millennial leaders with global mindset. This could be specially able leaders with global mindset. Move forward. What are you doing to make international assignments programs inclusive to women? How will these efforts manifest themselves in your international assignment program and structure and the selection of international assignees? The purpose for why I put this here, because there are a couple of organizations I've seen who will presume that the women will not be able to take up international assignments because they have families and children, or not send them abroad because to study or for a project or whatever, because how would she be able to come? She has 2 small children. Why not ask the woman? And so what are we going to do to be able to integrate them into assignments where they need to lean in? Does your organization have a target-driven or more federated approach to managing diversity initiatives? What I'm simply asking is, who do you need to influence to be able to make this happen? Is this only about the numbers that you're delivering? How will you deliver visible diversity actions and results? What measures of diversity are important to help your organization achieve your goals? Move forward. And I think with that, I'm just going to leave you with one last thought. There's often a dilemma on whether diversity and inclusion has a moral case or a business case. Is it about equity, dignity, justice? Is it about creativity, decision-making, marketing? And I want to be able to tell you it's both. So there is not only a business case, there's not only a moral case, there's not just a representation case, because oftentimes that representation case has got to do with marketing that the organization is diverse and inclusive. So I want to be able to, I've tried bringing in candor in this conversation because we want to move the agenda forward. We want to push the envelope. We want to raise the bar. We want more organizations to ask themselves tough questions. Move forward, Sunil. And so I'm going to just leave you with this. The Women Leadership Forum has a DNI certification program for practitioners. I know a lot of people got given this job without training. And so there's an opportunity and an invitation here to be able to come in and do this. It's 3 hours over 5 days, but it helps you to be able to, along the certification involves a project to be implemented using insights from the certification program. So I invite you to be able to enroll and to be able to come in, become part of this if you'd like to be able to work with a group of fellow DNI practitioners and learn to push this agenda the right way. So I wish you luck and thank you for being able to join this conversation here today. Anyone who would like to be able to, anyone who would like to be able to ask a question, I'm happy to be able to take that. All right, Supraja says these are amazing actionable tips. Thank you. And Indu says, while we see including diversity, the factors affecting them, domestic or professionally, must be identified and facilitate platforms to address it. Couldn't agree more. I'm just going to, at this point, bring this to an end. I hope you found this useful. If I went by Supraja, I think you did get some hacks that I promised at the start, or at least some provocative questions to be able to think about actually executing these agendas. But good luck and congratulations for all of you who are already doing such amazing work within your organizations. Keep going. We need lots and lots of more people like you in this world, actually, to be able to make this a diverse, equitable, and inclusive world. So shape the world, everyone, and good luck. Thanks for joining me in this Food for Thought session.